Hey there poetry pals, welcome back to another video. My name's Josie Alford and my debut poetry collection, Faulty Manufacturing, is coming out in March 2023. In this week's video, I'm going to be interviewing my illustrator Anna-Louise Highley about the process of designing my front cover. We talked about her and her creative practice. We talked about how we first came to work together, as well as working on the book from first draft to final thing that you have seen. We also discuss what it's like to work with clients, and we give some advice on what we think could be useful for you guys if you're going to go into that situation. And she actually answers my followers' questions about illustrating for poetry. But before we go any further, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications. The engagement really helps small creators like me get found. And you can pre-order my collection, Faulty Manufacturing, through the link in the description. So I started this interview with wanting to get to know a little bit more about Anna and her work.
Thank you for agreeing to do the video with me. I was really happy to do this, especially because before I was going about publishing the book, I had no idea what went into a book cover and how that works. So I'm really pleased to be able to make this video because it's something that I always wanted to learn. So thank you for agreeing to do it with me. So if we could start with tell us about you and what you do and your background and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, my background is I did an illustration degree graduated about 7 years ago now.
We don't need to do that because that's how we met, and I'm not okay with knowing that was that long ago.
I'm trying to do the maths now. I think it was about, I don't know, sometime in the past. So I went to UE in Bristol and I did an illustration degree, and obviously that's how we came to meet. So that was my undergrad, and kind of having left uni, I've done various bits and pieces. I still live in Bristol now, and I love living in Bristol. So sort of through various things, I now work in museum education, which I love. And sort of pull my arty side with my interest in museums together. So that's my kind of day job. But yeah, I've always sort of loved illustration. Obviously, that's my degree. And my practice is still very much ongoing, but it's just kind of, I guess, behind the scenes a lot more so than people might realise. I'm always making or trying to make. I guess me and my creative process as an illustrator, I define myself as a digital collage illustrator, which sounds a bit of a strange term. But I typically don't really draw, which I know when you think of illustration is what most people do. I wish I could draw, I can't. So that's kind of, I guess, my niche. I love sort of pulling different things together. Sort of collage materials, so like old magazines really excite me, books, internet archives of all different sort of imagery or resources or photos I can find, and so pulling things together. So that's kind of how I guess define what I do and what I make.
So what I'm interested about is it just digital, or do you take your hand to physical collage as well? Analog collage.
Analog, old school. It really depends. A lot of stuff I do find online just because there's a bigger breadth of material. But I've also got, I'm forever hanging on to things. Like I've got boxes and magazines and books and so it's a real mixture of the two. If I'm working on something and I think, I've got a really nice image for something that's in a magazine, I often will do a bit of both, a bit of old school and a bit of new school. But what I have been enjoying doing, I don't know if we necessarily use so much in your book, but I really enjoy sort of mark making, so if even sort of drawing and painting quite sort of abstract shapes and things, and then scanning them in and then sort of bringing them together with collaged images.
Oh, cool.
So that's something I'm still very much like exploring. But so yeah, the very short answer is a bit of both.
Yeah, nice.
I first came across Anna's work when I was working at the Students' Union at UWE. She was a student there, and we ended up collaborating on a project that involved illustrators responding to poems. Anna got my poem, and it looked like this. So here's us discussing that and how it came to be.
So yeah, the poem was called Photograph of Us. So yeah, tell me about it was a poem about being at Glastonbury Festival.
Yeah.
So tell me about your process and what you did. Do you remember the poem at all?
I remember
It's
snippets of it. Yeah, I remember snippets of it because I remember thinking like, how am I going to illustrate it? And I remember sort of pulling out different parts of the poem. From memory, I don't think I'd actually seen it. Larry might correct me on this, but I don't think I'd actually seen the poem prior. I think she very much just matched people.
Yeah,
that was quite nice in a way because you're given a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think in terms of responding to it, yeah, I remember reading it and sort of picking out. There was a line about flamingos, which is why you've got the floating flamingos in there. There was a line about, I think it was like drinking in a park or something like that, or like plastic bottles at a festival, like you just said. So yeah, I think I was just trying to sort of find really poignant things that sort of, I don't know. When I was reading it, I was like, oh, I can imagine like sitting in the park in the sun or at a festival, and how can you bring all of those ideas together?
Yeah. So, what I find really interesting about like this illustration thing is that the poem is called Photograph of Us, and it is a poem in response to a photo. And I think the challenge was to write an ekphrastic poem, and ekphrastic poems are poems inspired by visual art. So when Larry told me about this, thing where she was like, I want to have art inspired by poems, I was like, well, and on the theme of happiness, and I was like, okay, well, I have the perfect poem for this because it's a poem that's inspired by a visual medium. And so to have the, your artwork in response to the poem, in response to the photograph is just really, really nice. That's really interesting for me because like I said, I didn't know anything. We hadn't met prior, and I sort of got given a poem, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know that whole backstory behind it. So it's quite interesting in a way that, I don't know. That's a response, kind of a blind response in a sense, and then it seems like they've sort of, I don't know, they've come together.
I knew from the moment I first saw her illustration that I wanted her to design my first front cover. I hadn't even written the collection at that point. I didn't know what my collection was going to be about, but I knew that I wanted her to design it. Here is us discussing that process from the first draft right up to what you see today. And so I emailed you. Tell me about like what went through your mind when you got that email.
I just thought it was an exciting project. I was casting my mind back last night. I think yours is the only poetry work I've ever illustrated, and I think that still stands.
Yeah.
That's so I was just excited by, it's not something that I would choose to if I was working on something myself, it's not something I would automatically choose to do, and that's nice in a way because it's a challenge for me. So it was exciting, and I think pushes me to think of it differently. So
I remember after you agreeing, and we talked about the cost of it and stuff like that, and we agreed to that. So you're obviously doing this in your evenings and weekends around your day job, and we had a meeting, didn't we, where we hopped onto Zoom, and it was while I was away, and so we had a chat about like the poems and stuff like that. Did I send you the poetry collection to read as well? So once we'd had that chat, how did you approach it? Where did you start when you were approaching the thing?
I think one really positive thing I will say is that you had lots of ideas of what you wanted already.
Yeah.
Like, it's really difficult you know, sometimes if people want work and they just go, oh well, something like this or maybe something like that, you were really clear from the start on, I want it to include this, this and this. This is the kind of theme that I'm going for. And you had examples of other people's work, not to say that we were like, we'll pinch that, but you'd seen other book covers that you like, so that was really good. So in my head I was already kind of like pulling everything together, and that makes it so much easier for me because I'm not sort of clutching at straws of, oh well, I don't quite know what Josie's after. And it didn't feel like that from the start. You were really clear of what you wanted, which makes my life a hell of a lot easier. So I think from our first conversation, because I remember talking about, after you sort of sent me the list of the different things you wanted, in my mind they were all sort of coming together to make the image of the, you've promoted.
We've shown it, we've released it.
I'm not gonna
and no, you're all right. And it'll probably be coming up as B-roll as we talk, like, so people can see. So yeah, don't worry,
cool.
we can talk about it.
So like from that list and from what we discussed, in my mind, it felt like there was a sort of natural connection for the different things that you've mentioned, the sort of, and the idea of the kitchen was kind of, I don't know, just forming. It felt like a natural way to bring all of these different elements together. When I have made imagery in the past, I struggle with being really abstract with things. My brain's just not wired that way. I think I remember saying to you, like, I'm quite literal in some ways of like, I don't really know the best way to sum that up. I think my style of working works best when it sort of looks like a finished painting or a portrait or whatever it is, but then you sort of take a closer look and realise that it's a bit different, or collage elements. I just don't work very well being really, really abstract.
Which is interesting, because I think the final product that we ended up with, it's pretty abstract.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think maybe it's just the way my brain's wired that I have to sort of try and bring different elements together and slot them in a way that kind of makes some sense.
It needs an internal logic.
It
can't just be. How did you first approach it? So which sort of things? So you thought about the kitchen, right? So what happened then? Like, what were you?
I guess the first sort of step after we've had that conversation was just pulling the different imagery together. I think when you work in collage, you're very dependent on what you can find, and that often you'll start with a certain idea in your head of, I would really want something to look exactly like this, and then the chances are that I can't find that exact image that I've just imagined in my brain. So you have to be a bit adaptive with what you can find along the way. So I think after our conversation, it was very much me seeing what I can find and seeing what I can pull together, and how I can start sort of bringing all those different elements together. I remember, I think maybe it was our second Zoom, which I've also found as well, so I'll send it to you. I did a really sort of simplified, I wouldn't even call it a sketch, but when I work, because I don't really draw, I really struggle to do sort of mock-ups of things, or like first, like when you're trying to convey, like most illustrators, I would imagine, would do a sketch of something and send it to someone and go, what do you think of this? My brain doesn't work like that. So I have to find ways around it. So I remember, which is the image that I'm happy for you to show if you wanted to.
Oh, cool. That'd be awesome.
A really like simple first version of like what I was thinking. And it's just sort of the outline of a kitchen, and because otherwise I'm just sort of waffling on about something, and if you haven't got anything visual to see, it's like, where do you go from there? So I remember being like, right, I just need to start, and then Josie can see what I mean, and then we can go from there. So I guess that's my kind of first few steps in just sort of pulling the idea together and seeing what I could find, and seeing if it married up with what you were thinking as well, rather than me going off on a tangent trying to make something completely different.
So from there, you sent me that one, and we sort of talked about it and refined it. I remember saying the phrase moody but not too moody about the sea. So we had that first, you made your first mock-up for me, and then we sort of went from there with sort of feedback, and you did a couple of different versions for me. Tell me about that process, and maybe you can talk about using, because I haven't actually said this on the channel yet, but there are some family photos as part of your collage. So tell me about how, obviously you've had to find materials, but you also found images that were like my old family photographs that you were able to integrate, which for me makes it so special. But tell me about, like, going through the different iterations and how that was for you, and how it grew from that first image to the final product. What was that like for you?
I think it's really interesting having sent you that sort of first version, and like I said, I think because you had your different ideas for the different things you wanted to include, it made life a lot easier, because I had that sort of set list and I was like, right, well, we have to include these.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't sort of clutching at straws in that respect. I think I remember you saying moody but not too moody, and this idea of sort of surging, and the idea of the beach, and bringing in your family imagery, and that's really lovely for me, because it's nice knowing that it's special to you, it's completely unique. And there's obviously stories within things. I think for me it was just trying to pull all of those images together in a way that felt genuine. It wasn't just sort of sticking something on the top for the sake of having it there. It felt like it should have been there.
Yeah.
That sounds really
strange, the internal logic of falling apart kitchen on a beach. Exactly.
So for me it was just sort of bit by bit adding in the different elements and seeing what fit where and what felt, like I said, genuine. I think I remember when we spoke, or maybe it was over email because I think you were still away, but at one stage of it not being homey enough. And I remember being like, I get what she means. As soon as you said it, I was like, I get what she means. And it was really good, because I think at that stage we'd had a conversation, and again I remember you coming back to me and sort of saying like ... you had really clear feedback on how you wanted it to develop, and again that makes things so much easier for me, because then as soon as you said that, I was like, I know what she means, and then we can run with it. I think it's having someone who knows what they want and knows their work really well, and what you wanted, it makes all the difference.
I think I really enjoyed our first Zoom call, and I left feeling really excited because you held space for my weirdness, right? Because I knew what I was like. It was there in my brain, but weirdly, as a poet, I was struggling to get it out. And I think, from my day job experience of sort of working in marketing, I've worked with a lot of graphic designers before, and that process of drafting and making amendments and stuff like that, I have done that quite a lot, and I have made mistakes on that process quite a lot. So I've learned that being as specific as possible is really helpful. But I have to say that working with an illustrator on such a creative project rather than maybe a boring marketing project, you do get to make more fun feedback. I remember in one email, I remember typing up, please, can we turn the oven on and put a kebab in it?
Yeah.
That was a phrase that I actually typed out, which I really enjoyed. And then I was like, oh yeah, and can we put some dishes in the sink, and can the sink be on fire, please? It was just...
but that makes it fun for me as well. Because as soon as you started sort of, you get the ball rolling. As soon as you'd said sort of things like that, I was like, oh, okay, well, if we added in a little detail of that here, that could, that would really sing to that. And then it's really, I think having someone to sort of ping ideas back and forth from makes all the difference. when you said, I was like, I like a challenge. I'll put a kebab in the oven and it'll be on, and the sink will be on fire.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we moved the sink up, but there weren't any dishes in it. For one thing, and I was like, it's not clear enough that it's a sink. So we need some crockery to be like, we need some dirty dishes so people know.
But that's what's really helpful as well, is having someone else. Obviously it's your book and it's your collection of poetry, and you know it really well. But sometimes I think, as a creative person, you get so bogged down, but you're so focused on trying to get certain bits right, you sometimes need to have that moment to step away and look at it and be like, right, okay, what can I improve, what can I slightly alter? And having someone with sort of a fresh pair of eyes really, really helps.
Can I ask you another question just quickly? Because I remember one of the things that I asked you was I wanted to have cigarettes and beer bottles on the beach. Not that I'm pro litter, but maybe because my collection is littered with cigarettes and beer bottles. God, I'm such a twat. Right. But one of the things I was like, okay, I really want these beer bottles and whiskey bottles to look like this specific brand.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think I can actually have Stella like on my book cover. So what do we do? So how did you approach that? I'm really curious. This tiny little detail that's just in the corners of the front and back cover, like that's it. How did you approach doing those?
I think the best way of saying this without getting sued. Because I remember you saying that, and I was like, yeah, okay, like we can try. I think having looked at the shapes of the sort of bottles and their very distinctive labels, I was like, right, okay, what makes that look distinctively like that? And like with the Stella can, it's the red label and it's the white can.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, well, we're going to have to pare that down so we don't get sued for having Stella written across it, and the same with the whiskey. So I think it was taking out, being a little bit jammy, I want to say, and sort of taking out titles of things, or and I think I
think this is okay to say. It'll be fine.
I don't think they're going to come for us, are they? Disclaimer: they're not Stella cans on the cover. They're inspired by.
Unless it like sells, like sometimes controversy is good for book sales. So like, maybe it is Stella.
Why Stella? Yeah. I think with anything like that, it's just taking a step back and thinking, right, what makes that recognisable as that specific thing? And like I said, in that case, it was that particular design and those particular colours and tones. I think they do recognise as that when they register as that when you look at them. But so I guess it's just being a bit mindful of that when someone asks for something that's really obviously branded. Maybe try and think of a way around it.
Look, I want something that's Stella can adjacent, please.
Yeah.
So, Loki, I'm convinced that I was pretty awful to work with, as I wasn't the most responsive when I was going away around the world. So here's us discussing what it's like to work with clients, as well as advice for illustrators looking to work with writers, and advice for writers looking to work with illustrators.
What is the good and bad things about working with clients? And you can talk about me and you can tear me apart. And you can talk more generally about other things as well. So tell me about that.
I would say working with clients, the most exciting thing is being pushed to do things that are completely different. And like I said, yours is the only sort of poetry work that I've ever responded to. And it's not something that I think I would naturally have chosen to respond to otherwise. So that was really exciting. And having someone to sort of bounce ideas around with. Otherwise it's just me sat here on my laptop trying to make images. So having someone to send things to and get feedback and have a wider conversation makes it exciting for me. I think another thing, as I said, working with clients and talking about you, is that you knew what you wanted, and but there was still scope for me to bring in how I like working, alongside what you wanted. There was, it wasn't like, right, I want exactly this and it has to be this colour and it has to have this and this. It was really nice that you gave me some freedom as well to put my sort of stamp on it, I guess. So yeah, that was really enjoyable. Bad things about working with clients. I mean, you were traveling the world. I was sat on my laptop in rainy Bristol, like, I wouldn't be in Thailand. But I think in our situation, it was a case of, we were both really honest when we both started the project. So I said that I have a job outside of illustrating, so I'm not, on my emails 9 to 5 every day. I knew that you were traveling, so we were both quite upfront with that when we started. And I think it was good because we'd had quite a few conversations and I had a few Zooms before you'd been away. So the ball was already very much rolling. Yeah. I think it would have been harder had we not had them prior to you travelling.
Yeah.
Because then but yeah, every project and every person's different. So it's hard to I think just keeping in contact, I would say, is the main thing. Just feeling like you can ping someone an email, even if it's just something quite small.
Yeah.
And if you need a bit of reassurance on something, or if you think, something's not quite working, and vice versa, that means, if you're an artist or an illustrator, and also if you're the client on the other side of it, I think just feeling like you can talk to someone and keep in touch. And yeah.
Do you know what? I'm actually irritated how much good communication comes up just in life. Like, life is better when you communicate, and it's like, my therapist was right all along,
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be bringing up therapy. But it's interesting how often, like, communicating and just being open and, if you have a question, just asking it and not being afraid to ask is so important. And that brings me quite nicely onto, I know you said that you're, like, by no means an expert, not like a full-time freelancer and stuff, but you've obviously, still have some experience, and then maybe you've learnt from that experience as well. So my question for you is, what advice do you have for illustrators? Whether that's sort of, working with clients or, working with poets or whatever. And then on the other side of that is, what advice do you have for poets or writers who are looking to work with illustrators?
I would say if you're an illustrator or creative in any respect, I'd say just make the most of any opportunity that comes your way, even if it seems quite small. I was just thinking back, had I not agreed to be a part of Larry's project, we wouldn't be sat here right now, and I obviously wouldn't have known at that point in time that it was going to result in this. So I think just being open to, opportunities, even if you, in the moment, you might think, maybe that's not quite for me. You haven't got anything to lose by having a go at something. I just guess being a bit open-minded. And I would say to anyone looking to work with an illustrator, if you're a poet or a writer, I think coming with ideas of things that you want, and maybe previous examples of book covers that you like will really help whoever your artist, illustrator is, to just sort of see where you're coming from. I think the worst thing is coming with nothing. We're visual people, give us visuals and then we can go from there. Again, I think just keeping an eye out, exactly like you had done. You kept examples of other covers that you really liked, and then I could see sort of what your preferences were in terms of design. And
it helps that I'm really quite judgmental. Like, I genuinely judge books by their covers. So I came in sort of knowing with a strong idea what I wanted.
Next up, I asked my followers if they had any questions for Anna, and this is her answering them.
So the first one was, I have a couple of questions regarding illustrating poetry. The first one is on the practical side. How do I get my watercolour pencil images translated into the print version of the poetry book? So this person is actually doing illustrations for a friend's poetry publication. Are there any tips to consider when creating the images in order to make this process as easy as possible? So that's more about taking physical drawings and making them digital. So I know you're mostly a digital artist, but do you have any advice for that one?
If it were me, I would just become a bit more comfortable with perhaps scanning your work in. Try and find a decent scanner that you can, I don't know, borrow, buy, use, whatever, or even a decent camera. And I think just play around with seeing how to play around with taking digital images of your work, whether that's through a scanner or through a camera, and just sort of have a bit of a play. Really, it's your work. You'll know how you want it to be perceived, and yeah, you'll know how to make it look its best, if that makes sense. So I think with translating anything analog into digital, it's just it's giving yourself a bit of time to get used to that process, because they're very different. But one of the beauties, I will say, of working in digital is, you don't have to be a digital artist. Lots of people do that translation with analog to digital, but then once you've got your work into a digital format, you do have much more options of, like, you can play around with the color, you can play around with saturation, the light, the dark, the shadow, whatever you want to. So in some respects you do have a lot more freedom. So that's my long-winded answer. I just say have a bit of an experiment, have a bit of a play around with how you the best way that you can find to translate your work into digital. One thing I will say is I prefer working in Photoshop. Lots of people don't, and lots of people find their different ways of working. Most designers will use Adobe software. That's not everyone, but generally people tend to. Adobe used to, I think they still do, you can get a 30-day free trial for any of their packages. And I would say to anyone out there, like, starting out, make the most of that. Like, just get them, have a bit of a play. You really don't have to be an expert. But what I'm finding more and more is I do more work, and even more graphic design work as well. Even just having sort of a basic amount of knowledge of how to use those programs really helps me out. And like, YouTube is amazing, like Google stuff. I'm forever Googling things and little hacks of how to use programs. But it just gives you a little bit more confidence when you're trying to do that translation of your work. But don't stop working in analog. You do you, but if you can help yourself in becoming a bit more comfortable with sort of digital editing, I guess, then I think it does pay off.
Yeah, sure. And like, I use Adobe software for my video editing, and I do some basic graphic design on Photoshop, like not. But I know that a lot of publishers will use InDesign as part of their, putting the book together. So knowing how to use that is really helpful as well. So and YouTube has so many. Bloody love the internet. People who just put that advice out there for free. Love them. Love them so much. So mad love to the people who put out Adobe tutorials for free. Like, thank you so much. And especially, like, when you're searching, you don't even know the word for what you want to do. And they have got their tags and their algorithm perfect, because I can be like, how do I make this wiggly thing happen, and they will just know, and it comes up.
There's a world of experts out there, and like, again, I'm forever searching stuff on there. I use Photoshop a lot, but I'm still learning.
Oh god.
It's really satisfying. You find a little hack for something, you're like, oh yes.
It's also when you've been doing things the long way round, so you really work out the shortcut. There's a really humbling moment.
I've spent hours of my life doing that, and just a button and it's done.
Secondly, I'm wondering if your illustrator has any advice for illustrating the essence of a poem, rather than a completely literal series of images drawn from the words. Some of the stanzas that are more based upon feeling and senses can be tricky to capture, yet so poignant. So what do you think? It's interesting that she uses the word literal when you have just said that you're...
I'm quite a literal illustrator, so probably not the best person to answer.
But it's interesting because you say this, and then you've created this sort of lemonade bottle full of what looks like rosé wine with glitter, with inflatable flamingos floating inside on a picnic blanket in a park. So like you say you're a really literal person, but this doesn't look literal at all. So
I think maybe I'm projecting how I feel like my brain works. Like I'm quite a literal thinker. I'm probably projecting that more. I would say like the essence of something is a really hard thing to capture in any sense of anything. But maybe I think again the thing is speaking to the person who, I hate the word client, but the client or whoever you're working for, speaking to them and understanding what they want as an end product, whether they want something really abstract or they want something that's quite literal. And I think you'll find your answers more so from them. I think even just like, I don't know, writing out ideas, like love a mood boards, Pinterest boards, just to kind of, just, I don't know, maybe get you sort of step back from it and that's very badly answered, but
I think maybe from a poet's perspective, one of the things that I loved about this photo, this illustration that you made, was I wasn't able to give any tips about what I wanted. It was very much here's a poem, you get what you're given back.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I found so fascinating about the whole booklet is how all these different illustrators took these poems and you'd hook on one thing, right? Like there's something in the poem that you responded to, that you saw and you were like, right, that's what I'm going to hook it onto, right? And that could be one of the images that is used, like it could be one of the similes or metaphors or whatever. So it's not that you're like literally like, oh, they said brave like a lion, so I'm going to just draw a lion. There's a lot, it's what stands out to you as the reader, and what's the like, as the reader, this is something that is sticking out to me, so that's how I want to illustrate it. I'm interested in your personal creative process and practical steps to get from the initial concept to a published book cover. So how do you, I sort of see that as two levels. How do you marry your personal creative process and the practicalities of it from the beginning to like the final thing?
I guess kind of what I mentioned a bit earlier on, like when we were initially talking about what you wanted, and I know when I create work that I think it works best when it sort of looks like a completed image or a finished, I don't know, landscape or whatever it is, but there's elements within it that are slightly off and maybe not quite right, and that's kind of the fun part of making people look a bit closer and go, actually, oh no, that's not quite what I thought it was. And I think I know myself when I'm sort of thinking of imagery, and I guess I just sort of naturally in my brain pulls things together to create one final thing. Other people probably think or work completely differently. So I guess for me, when we sort of started talking and we were sharing ideas, I was like, right, I think this would work. With the list of things that you gave me, I was like, I think this could really work well as sort of one complete image, but you've got those little snippets of detail in it to make sure that everything you wanted is represented. So I think that was really nice because it meant that you had everything you wanted to be included, but it meant that I could still sort of work in a way that I felt comfortable with, and the two could be brought together to make a finished thing. So like if you come to me and said I want an oil painted illustrated cover, that's obviously not my bag. And I would say really sorry, but not the one for me. But so I think it's just kind of knowing, I don't want to say knowing how you work, 'cause it's different for every project, but knowing how you can get the best out of your work. That sounds very I don't know.
No, that sounds cool. So that's kind of all the questions that I had for you. Is there anything that you wanted to add to this sort of video about the book cover making process?
I think just again, like I said, it was really exciting for me to be able to work on it. It's the first I've done book covers before, but sort of perspective. So this is really exciting for me to think that it's going to be on an actual book that people are going to hold and read. Like that doesn't happen very, very often. So that's really exciting. But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it, and yeah, thank you for asking me to be a part of it and letting me put kebabs in ovens and other fun, mad stuff.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of this process. I didn't realise how much fun it was going to be when I first sent you that email. I love the fact that we've got like little Easter egg family photos in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for, this whole process. Thank you for doing this video as well. I'm really, really pleased about the whole thing. And I'm so glad to be able to like showcase our work next to each other. I think like this collection works so well with your writing style. That sort of like hodgepodge of bringing lots of different things together really works well with the themes of the collection. So I'm really pleased to be able to work with you on it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So I actually really enjoyed working with Anna, and the way that she made it feel like a really collaborative process between the two of us. And her links for her website and her Instagram are in the description, so please do go and follow her and support her. She makes some really cool stuff, so if you've got the money, you should buy it. Finally, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. The engagement really helps small creators like me get found. And why don't you follow me on social media? I am Josie Alford Poet on all the things. To support me with your money, you can pre-order my book. You can buy a ticket for my online and in-person book launch. You can buy me a coffee or join me on Patreon. The links to do all of that are in the description down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all next week. Bye.